Number 10. Jack Jack. This theory is wild and kinda fun. Pixar has a history of throwing in Easter eggs from all around their films into their newest projects. One of the most famous is A113. A113 is an animator's inside joke. It refers to a classroom number at the California Institute of the Arts where many of the Pixar folks got their start. The number has worked its way into nearly every Pixar movie, from the license plate on Andy's SUV in the Toy Story series, to a Roman numeral in Brave, to a movie marquee in Incredibles 2. Speaking of the Incredibles franchise, the first number on the list is referring to Jack Jack. In the Incredibles 2, another Pixar film, baby Jack Jack Parr has some cool superpowers and can teleport to other dimensions. During his teleportation, a fan theory goes, Jack Jack visited characters from Monsters Inc. At one point in Monsters Inc., a monster says, "A kid flew over me and blasted a car with his laser vision." One of Jack Jack's powers is laser vision. This is kinda creepy because I feel like Jack Jack could legitimately pull a Homelander from The Boys and laser all of the monsters in half. Let's just hope he doesn't get into the monster world. Number 9. Time moves slower in the monster universe. Redditor Adam Simon noted that time might be experienced differently in the Monsters Inc. universe. The theorist points to several different facts to back up his idea. Among them, Boo's voice is more mature sounding at the end of the film than in its beginning. Sully seems surprised to see Boo at the end of the movie, and we as the audience do not get to see what she looks like. And if monsters can slow time, it explains why they always elude parents. This could lead to many questions. How long do monsters stay in university if time moves slower for them? Could you imagine doing 8 years because time moves slower? I don't think I'd survive in that world. Number 8. Toys are sentient. One theorist explained his reasoning for his theory about toys being sentient in the Monsters universe. It all apparently shows itself in the opening sequence, which introduces us to the basic mechanics of how monsters scare children. The monster, Mr. Bile, sneaks into a child's room and attempts to scare him, but the kid wakes up and sees him. We see that Mr. Bile is actually more scared of the kid than vice versa, and he trips and falls for comedic effect. This of course is a simulation, a demonstration of how not to scare a kid, so that the movie can cut to Sully, our main character, who is the best scarer at Monsters Incorporated. The simulation we just watched was at the factory, and it's our setup for everything that happens next in the movie. Something that has bugged a lot of people, including myself, in a major goof that transpires during the simulation. When Mr. Bile walks in, we get a clear shot of the room's layout and where everything is located. The soccer ball is under the bed, the toy train and its tracks are at the foot of the bed, and one of the books near the window hangs over the edge. But as the scene changes, everything moves around. The soccer ball inexplicably moves to the side of the bed. It's in a totally different location, and it eventually shows up again at the foot of the bed where the train tracks have disappeared. Instead, there's a bunch of jacks in its place. Mr. Bile steps back on the soccer ball and falls on the jacks like we're watching a better version of Home Alone 3. We even see that the books on the toy box have moved a little bit, but they return to their original spot toward the end of the scene. Could this be continuity errors, or are the toys in the universe really alive? Number 7. Boo is the witch from Brave. This one is actually really big. This fan theory has gained a lot of traction, and with good reason. It states that Boo in Monsters Inc. is the old witch in the Pixar film Brave. Brave is set in Scotland during the Dark Ages, and the old witch is old, so time travel is required for this theory to fly. But according to John Negroni, author of the Pixar theory, the signs are all there. The keys to the witch's magic are will-o'-the-wisps, which she uses to employ her magical abilities. Negroni wrote, "The theory is that Boo discovered a way to use doors to travel through time on her own, possibly by developing magic on her own. She probably went back in time to the Dark Ages to get more magic from the will-o'-the-wisps. And why would she do that? To find her childhood friend Sully." Further fuel for this theory, in Brave, a wood carving of Sully is visible in the witch's workshop. Number 6. The monsters don't think humans are dangerous. Just as some fans believe there is ample evidence of humans being perilous to monsters, other theories point to the exact opposite. It's only a ruse established by the Child Detection Agency to keep the children of the world from getting scared. Redditor CyberHusky58 noted that when Randall and Waternoose's plot is exposed, Agent Number 1, who is undercover as Roz from the CDA, enters the scene. Not only is she not at all concerned about the presence of a human, but she lets Sully spend time with Boo. So perhaps humans are not unsafe in the least, and the CDA is only trying to protect the human children from becoming frightened. And of course, denying kids their screams means the monsters would lose their power source, so win-win for the humans? But if they really aren't scared of the humans and that info could get out, the whole corporation could be shut down, leading to a major power outage in the monsters universe. I kind of want to see a dystopian apocalypse movie with Sully and Mike as the main characters now. Imagine that. Number 5, the monsters travel back in time to scare the kids. So there are no more humans on Earth or something. Perhaps they traveled to space, and Earth was abandoned, or they all nuked themselves into oblivion. What do the monsters do now? Are they supposed to just revert back to the monster Stone Age and scare each other for power? Well, this theory says no siree. This theory, posited by John Negroni in his book The Pixar Theory, states that the monsters actually travel back in time to scare the kids. That way, no matter what the humans do to doom themselves or move themselves off of Earth, the monsters will always have their source of power. Number 4, Monstropolis is the afterlife for the forgotten imaginary friends mentioned in Inside Out. In Inside Out, we learn that everything forgotten gets dropped into the memory dump, then disappears forever. Bing Bong, Riley's imaginary friend, has his wagon thrown into the memory dump, but where does it end up? Redditor Ice Metal Punk theorized that the monsters in Monster Inc. are actually the imaginary friends that human kids forgot as they grew up. The creatures had to learn to live together and form a functioning society. That would make everything much, much darker. It would also give the monsters a motive other than power to scare the kids. Perhaps they want revenge for the kids abandoning them and forgetting all about them. It also would make sense why all of the monsters are odd looking. Some of them looked pretty friendly. Number 3, time moves faster in the monsters universe. There's a theory that time moves faster in the monsters world. Redditor Ali, Gali laid out the case. First, the monsters can scare hundreds of kids in a single time zone at the same time, which seems to imply that they can accomplish several hours worth of work in what feels like a short span to humans. Second, in the chase scene, Sully and Mike enter the human world and dart from closet to closet within just a few different houses. But Randall's place between doors and time passing outside the factory seems to suggest that these events are happening over a while. Also, banishment to the human world appears to be a significant fear for the monsters, perhaps because time moves so slowly for them in the human realm. Number 2, the monsters evolved from the animals that took over the world after WALL-E. This idea, part of John Negroni's theory of a unified Pixar universe, suggests that the monsters in Monsters Inc. were the natural production of evolution, developing from the animals that took over the planet after humans deserted it in the events that preceded the plot of WALL-E. Monsters Inc. then actually takes place in a super distant future, long after what transpires in WALL-E. This is somewhat plausible if you also agree with the theory that they travel back in time to scare the kids. Number 1, the monsters saw the plague. At first, it seems like the monsters fear a war scenario with the humans, where contamination by the alien microbes of the human world could wipe them out. But Sully and Mike's immunity to Boo seems to discredit this. However, if the doors are able to travel across time, it's entirely possible that at some point, one or several monsters traveled back to the 14th century on a scare mission. For instance, if they visited Europe around 1348, they could have entered the bedroom of a highly infectious victim of the plague, possibly even a room stacked with plague-ridden corpses. If the infection spread to them, even hairy beasts would be right to be petrified. After all, experiencing huge blood-filled boils, intense pain, fever, diarrhea, and passing isn't anyone's idea of fun. With that risk factor, you'd think they'd seek an alternative energy source rather than using only children's screams.
Coming in at our number 10 spot, we have Woody is Evil. Toy Story is a beloved franchise that has captured the hearts of audiences of all ages. Among the colorful cast of characters that make up the world of Toy Story, Woody the Cowboy is perhaps one of the most beloved. However, a Reddit user by the name of Itchy Rabbit has put forth a fascinating theory that challenges the way we view Woody as a character. This theory proposes that Woody is not so different from Lotso, which is the evil bear from Toy Story 3, and that the only thing that saved Woody from turning evil like Lotso was the fact that he had a kid, Andy, who loved and played with him. The Reddit user argues that if Andy had brought a new Woody toy in the first movie, then Woody would have turned out just like Lotso, hurt, bitter, angry, and just wanted revenge on the world. Both Woody and Lotso are leaders who go through a lot to try to get back their respective kids, and the only thing that separates them is the fact that Woody has Andy. This theory challenges the notion that Woody is a perfect, flawless character, and points to his darker side that is hinted at in the first movie when he starts to feel like he's being replaced by the newer, shinier Buzz Lightyear toy. While everything turns out alright for Woody in the end, the Reddit user suggests that in a parallel universe, there may be a Toy Story where Woody is the evil toy that needs to be overthrown. At a number 9 spot, we have Andy's dad. If you're a fan of Toy Story, you definitely know Andy, who's the young boy who owns the beloved toys, Woody, Buzz, and the whole gang. But have you ever wondered about the absence of Andy's father? Well, there's a theory that suggests his father passed away and that his loss is what drives Andy to become so attached to his toys in the first place, particularly Woody, who, as the theory goes, was owned by his father. To give some context, Woody is a rare and valuable toy from a 50s TV show called Woody's Roundup. This is why he is stolen in the second film. But how did Andy, a 6-year-old in the first film, get his hands on such a prized possession? The theory speculates that Woody was actually owned by Andy's father, and because his father had passed away, that's why Andy had such a strong connection to him. Supporting this theory is a scene in the second Toy Story movie when Andy's mom tells the owner of Al Toys Barn that Woody is not for sale because he is a family possession. Additionally, we know that Andy's dad had polio as a kid, which can have long-term effects on baby boomers later in life. It's possible that complications from the disease could have been fatal for Andy's father, and all of Andy's father's belongings, aside from the new toys, were burnt because of polio, making Woody, Mr. Potato Head, and Slinky Dog the only possessions that survived. Interestingly, the name Andy on the bottom of Woody's foot is actually a reference to Andy's father, whose name was Andy Sr. All of these clues and details add up to the theory that Woody was owned by Andy's father and that this loss is what drives Andy's attachment to him in the first place. Coming in at our number 8 spot, we have a war. A Reddit user by the name A Space Communist has put forward a fascinating theory about the underlying theme of the movies that explains why the world in the Toy Story franchise changes so dramatically over time, and there is a potential evidence here for a war. The theory suggests that the first 2 movies are set during the space race in the 1960s. This is evident in the technology and toys that are featured in the films, such as Buzz Lightyear, who is modeled after the astronauts of the time. However, there is a significant time jump between Toy Story 2 and Toy Story 3, which takes place in a world with laptops, online gaming, and modern cars. This leap in technology seems to be too significant for just a decade to pass. The Reddit user suggests that a world war took place over the course of these movies. The technology advanced so rapidly during the war that it explains the leap we see between the movies. The proof of this theory can be seen in the maps that are featured in the movies as well. The maps seem to show the world map as very different from ours, with countries not being the same and borders being all over the place. And if you look closely, it definitely looks like a massive war took place, which would explain the significant changes in technology and the world we see in Toy Story 3. While this theory may seem far-fetched, it is not entirely impossible. After all, we are talking about a world in which toys can talk. Coming in at our number 7 spot, we have Sid's abused life. Another popular theory focuses on the character of Sid, who everyone knows is the villain in the first movie. Some fans believe that Sid wasn't a bad kid at all, but rather a product of a poor home life. One reason for this is that the dangerous rocket toy that Sid is seen playing with may have been ordered by his parents, who didn't care that he was too young to play with it. Additionally, there is a scene in the movie that shows Sid's father passed out in front of the TV with Coca-Cola cans all over the floor. Interestingly, some fans believe that Sid later became a garbage man and that he did so in order to save all the forgotten toys from being incinerated at the city dump. This theory is supported by a scene in Toy Story 3 where a garbage man is seen wearing the same shirt that Sid wore as a child. You saw that photo? Fans speculate that Sid changed his ways after learning that toys could talk and that he wanted to make amends for his past behavior by instead giving love to the toys that wouldn't otherwise receive it. Coming in at our number 6 spot, we have corpses. A Twitter user by the name of Stigib3 tweeted a theory that has sent shockwaves throughout the Toy Story fandom. According to the tweet, Stigib3's daughter suggested that if one of the toys died, Andy wouldn't know and would continue to play with its corpse. The tweet went viral and sparked a conversation about the dark implications of the theory. While there may have been theories about how the toys in Toy Story came to life, the idea that they have a limited lifespan only to be played with as a lifeless corpse is particularly disturbing. Fans of the franchise are now left to grapple with the possibility that their beloved characters could meet such a grim fate, and next time you watch this movie, you're probably gonna wonder if one of these people are actually a corpse. In the hump of our list, we have mutants. Have you ever watched the first Toy Story movie and wondered about those creepy mutant toys that Sid created? You might have found comfort in the fact fact that they were just made up for the movie. But what if we told you that they may actually exist in real life? In the 1990s, the Unknown Museum in Marin, California held an exhibition that featured a range of odd and unusual toys. The Toy Story animators saw this exhibition and were inspired by what they saw, leading them to create their own versions of the mutant toys for the movie. That means that the designs for those creepy toys were based on real life toys. So somewhere out there, tucked away in a dark and dusty box, those mutant toys may really exist, waiting to be discovered. It's a creepy thought, but it's also a testament to the creativity of these Toy Story animators who were able to get inspiration from real life and turn it into a magical and unforgettable experience. Shout out to them. Number 4, Wheezy is evil. Watch Toy Story for a second time and keep an eye on Wheezy to see if there's any truth to this next theory. The theory goes that while we see Al from Al's Toy Barn as the main villain in Toy Story 2, it's actually Wheezy who's the mastermind behind everything. He's a toy who has been forgotten and left on a shelf, and he's bitter about it. While he sees Woody, who's still loved and played with, he decides to take matters into his own hands. Wheezy's plan is to get Woody out of the way so he can become Andy's favorite toy. He knows that Woody is the leader of the toys and that if you can get rid of him, the other toys will be easy to manipulate. So he orchestrates a plan to get Woody sold at a yard sale, where he can be snatched up by a toy collector and then taken way far away. That theory is supported by some of Wheezy's actions in the movie. For example, he is the one who tells Woody about the yard sale in the first place, and he seems almost too eager to get rid of him. He also doesn't seem too upset when Woody is taken away, which is strange for a toy who's supposed to be his friend. Of course, this theory is just speculation, and there's no concrete evidence to support it. It's possible that Wheezy is just a lovable character who got a raw deal in life, but it does add a very interesting layer to this story. All the way down in number 3 spot, we have similar faces. In 2017, The Mirror shared a story that pointed out a peculiar detail in the original Toy Story movie that some people may have missed. The children in the movie, including Andy and his friends, all have very similar faces. Have you noticed? Some viewers have even noticed that the children look almost identical to each other and to Andy's neighbor, Sid, who enjoys torturing toys. This has led to some interesting theories about what this could mean. Some people speculate that the similarity in the children's faces were simply a product of animation limitations at the time. While Pixar's animations have held up well over the years, they may have not been able to create as much variety in the humans' faces as they would have liked. However, others believe that there is something more significant going on. Some suggest that the humans in the movie are actually the toys and that what we perceive as the toys are really living people. This theory could explain why the toys are able to move and talk, but it also raises other questions as well, so really, I don't know what to believe anymore. Number 2, immortality. According to a theory circulating online, the reason why we keep getting Toy Story movies is that the toys can only die if they are crushed or burned. Otherwise, they continue to live out the same life cycle over and over again, forgetting their old owners and then starting anew with new children. It's a haunting idea, but it does make sense given the evidence presented in the films. For example, we know that Woody, Jessie, and Bullseye all originate from the 50s and could potentially be toys that were kept in mint condition, thus preserving their lifespan. And if you're a believer in the grand Pixar theory, you might be interested to know that Rex the dinosaur, who has been a beloved character in the Toy Story movies, also appears in the film WALL-E. But it's not just a toy dinosaur that's the same model as Rex in Toy Story. It's actually a Rex, who has lived through the years witnessing humanity's demise. This theory adds a completely different dread to a franchise that's meant to be enjoyed by kids and adults alike. It forces us to consider what it's truly like to live and to come to terms with our own mortality. But it's a testament to the depth and complexity of this story, and for all I know, it could be true. At number 1 spot, we have a genocide. Before I mention this point, it's one of the darkest about the show, but it is a theory out there, so I just have to mention it. One of the darkest theories about Toy Story is a comparison made by John Hoffman of UGO between the toys and the Holocaust. Hoffman suggests that the toys being abandoned by Andy for college is similar to Jewish people being abandoned by countries as the Third Reich began to spread across Europe. Woody gathers the toys to form a plan, and they refuse to be abandoned and give up. Buzz Lightyear steps forward and suggests they hide in an attic, drawing parallels to many Jewish people who tried to hide from the Germans in the attics, like Anne Frank and her family. However, the darkest comparison is that being taken to Sunnyside Daycare is akin to a concentration camp, where they found themselves trapped among others in the same situation. While this comparison is truly disturbing and perhaps unnecessary, it exists online and continues to be talked about by those who are willing to delve into this dark theory. So if you want to know more, just search it up and read it yourself online before I get in too much trouble for telling too much. Coming in at a number 10 spot, we have Pocahontas. The Disney movie Pocahontas has been the subject of much controversy due to its portrayal of the historical figure of the same name. While the movie tells a story of a young Native American woman falling in love with a British captain and intervening to stop a conflict between their people, the true story of Pocahontas is quite different. Pocahontas was born in the late 1500s and was the daughter of a Powhatan chief. Her given name was actually Mitaka, and Pocahontas was a nickname that meant spoiled or naughty child. And as a child, Pocahontas would have witnessed the arrival of English settlers in search of the New World, which resulted in numerous clashes between the two groups. One of the most famous events involving Pocahontas was her intervention to save the life of English explorer Captain John Smith. However, it's unlikely that there was any sort of romantic involvement between the two. Pocahontas was later captured by English settlers and eventually married a tobacco planter named John Rolfe, taking the name Rebecca. This was the first recorded marriage between a European man and a Native American woman. And then after 2 years of marriage, John and Rebecca Rolfe traveled to England, where Pocahontas met Captain John Smith once again, but refused to speak to him. And this is where the story kind of takes a dark turn, because sadly, Pocahontas became ill and passed away at the age of 21 while returning back to Virginia from England. There were suspicions of poisoning, but this has never been confirmed. And now it's a movie, and since you heard this origin story, I bet you'll view this movie a bit more differently than the last time you watched it. Coming in at a number 9 spot, we have The Hunchback of Notre Dame. The Hunchback of Notre Dame is a classic Disney movie that retells Victor Hugo's famous novel. However, what many people don't know is that there was a real-life inspiration for the character of Quasimodo. Henry Simpson, a British sculptor, wrote a memoir about his time repairing the Notre Dame in the 1820s. He describes a man named M. Trahan, who was the lead carver of his crew and who had a hump on his back that was very noticeable. Trahan worked closely with a sculptor who was almost exclusively referred to as the Hunchback by his colleagues. The Hunchback was a government sculptor who mostly kept to himself, but he and Trahan worked in the area of Paris where Victor Hugo lived. Hugo closely monitored the restoration of the Notre Dame and likely knew the Hunchback, if not personally, at least from a distance. Not long after, Hugo published The Hunchback of Notre Dame in 1831, and the rest is history. It's definitely a telltale sign the way society mistreats those who are very different from others. Coming in at a number 8 spot, we have Mulan. Mulan is based on a Chinese folklore tale dating back to 420 CE, but the true story is even more fascinating and darker than the family-friendly version. The story follows Hua Mulan, who disguises herself as a man to take her father's place in a fight against Genghis Khan. She is highly skilled in martial arts, sword fighting, and archery, and she manages to go undetected in the army for 12 years until her true identity was revealed. After revealing herself, Mulan befriends another woman named Du Zhang and the emperor's daughter, and the trio continues to fight for their country. However, after the king is overthrown, they are forced to surrender, and Mulan returns home to find her mother remarried. She's ordered to become a concubine for the rest of her life, but she refuses to face such dishonor and takes her own life instead. The true Mulan story is not only a story of bravery and strength, but also a story of sacrifice and really extreme tragedy. Although there is speculation that the actual warrior of Mulan could have been a real woman, the tale has been passed down for centuries and has inspired countless people, including the creators of the beloved Disney movie. At a number 7 spot, we have Pinocchio. Pinocchio, the lovable puppet who has longed to be human, has been a beloved character for generations. But did you know that the story of Pinocchio is actually quite dark? Well, the original tale, written by Carlo Collodi in the late 19th century, is a far cry from the Disney classic we all know and love. In the original story, Pinocchio is constantly punished for his bad behavior in increasingly gruesome ways. In fact, the original ending had Pinocchio being hanged for his misdeeds. But why was the story so dark? It's said that Collodi was inspired by the behavior of the children he saw on the streets of Italy. He wanted to write a cautionary tale that would teach children about the dangers of lying and disobedience. And while the story may have been dark, it certainly resonated with some readers. Pinocchio quickly became a beloved character in Italy and beyond, and when the Disney film was released in 1940, it was a far more sanitized version of the real story. Jiminy Cricket became a prominent character, and Pinocchio's misdeeds were toned down. But even with all the changes, the story still manages to teach some valuable lessons about honesty, bravery, and selfishness. At number 6 spot, we have Rapunzel. While many of us may be familiar with the tale of Rapunzel and her long golden hair, many of you don't know that it's inspired by a real story. Introducing the story of Barbara as recorded by Jacobus de Varogny in the 13th century. It's a harrowing tale of a young woman's rebellion and ultimate persecution. Barbara was a beautiful and headstrong young woman who lived with her wealthy father, Dioscorus. Many suitors sought her hand in marriage, but Dioscorus made a rule that they could only meet Barbara after an interview with him. One day, after an argument with her father about wanting more independence, Dioscorus locked Barbara up in a tower to prevent her from meeting with suitors behind his back. Barbara's only contact with the outside world was through the townspeople who delivered food to her. One day, someone left her a book explaining Christianity. At the time, Christianity was viewed as a religious cult that the Romans were trying to prevent from taking over. Despite the risk, Barbara read the book and fell in love with Christianity, deciding to convert eventually. Using her beauty and charm, Barbara convinced the nearby workers to send over a doctor who was actually a priest in disguise. In the most significant act of rebellion she could do at the time, Barbara was baptized. However, when Dioscorus returned home, he discovered what his daughter had done and reported her to the authorities. Barbara was dragged by her long hair to the town square, where she was beaten, tortured, and burned by her community. Finally, her father chopped off her own head with a sword. So, if this origin story won't give you a horrific perspective, I don't really know it will. In the hump of our list, we have Jungle Book. Rudyard Kipling's The Jungle Book has been loved by audiences for years through various film adaptations that capture the essence of the story. A young boy named Mowgli who learns the importance of self-discovery and the harmony between man and nature. However, what many people may not know is that the story of Mowgli was actually inspired by a real-life boy who was discovered by hunters in 1867, living in the jungle, raised by wolves, and completely unaware of human behavior and language. The boy was taken to a nearby orphanage where he was given the name Dina Sankar, which means Saturday in Hindi, the day he was discovered. Being raised by wolves, Dina Sankar mimicked their behavior, walking on all fours and eating raw meat while gnawing on the bones to sharpen his teeth. He had no understanding of human behavior, of language, and instead growled and howled like a wolf in an attempt to communicate. The missionaries at the orphanage attempted to train the boy in a human lifestyle, teaching him to walk on 2 feet and speak in a human language. However, he never fully acclimated to human behavior and language and never learned to speak it himself. Instead, he learned to understand language in his own way and eventually wore clothes, walked like a human, and even smoked cigarettes at one point. Number 4, Dumbo. Dumbo, the beloved Disney movie that has captured the hearts of literal millions, and it's based on a real-life elephant named Jumbo who lived in the 1800s. However, it's a pretty dark story. Jumbo was captured by hunters and separated from his mother, who was tragically slaughtered for her tusk. He was then transported to the London Zoo, where he was put on display for the public to look at. Jumbo became increasingly aggressive as time went by, which led him to being sold to the P.T. Barnum's traveling circus in the United States. During Jumbo's time in the circus, he was routinely given whiskey to calm him down. He was often found sedated and would even consume champagne and whiskey-soaked biscuits. Jumbo's health began to deteriorate rapidly, and he was used as an attraction for visitors to ride, which caused his joints to wear out faster than normal. Jumbo passed away young after being hit by a freight train, likely due to his deteriorating health. Even after his death, he was put on display for 4 years in a New York City's gala and paraded around as a roadside attraction. And this sad story of Jumbo definitely sheds light on the dark side of the circus industry and the cruel treatments of animals during this time. Number 3, Beauty and the Beast. The story of Pedro Gonzalez, also known as Petrus Gonzalez, is a fascinating and heartbreaking one that takes us back to the 16th century. Born with a rare condition called Ambra syndrome, which causes excessive hair growth all over the body, Pedro was shunned and outlawed by his community as a freak. At the age of 10, he was kidnapped by the local ambassador and gifted to King Henry II as a slave. In the court of King Henry II, owning exotic and outlandish people was a point of pride and elevated one's status among high society. Pedro was treated like an animal, trapped in a cage, and fed raw meat to survive. He didn't speak well, and he had been abandoned in his early years, and basically he was essentially treated like a pet. His name was changed to Petrus Gonzalez by the king, who believed that his original Spanish name sounded too foreign. Petrus lived like this for years until the queen decided to experiment with her late husband's gift. She arranged a marriage between Petrus and a local servant girl named Catherine, allegedly chosen for her distinct beauty but without any knowledge of the queen's true motives. So on their wedding day, Catherine was shocked to see her groom covered head to toe in hair and was forced to marry him. So yeah, think about that next time you watch this movie. Pretty dark. Number 2, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is a classic fairy tale that has been enjoyed by children and adults alike since its release in 1937. The story follows the beautiful Snow White, who lives with her jealous stepmother, the evil queen. The queen orders a huntsman, but he can't go through with it and instead sets her free in the forest. This is where she befriends 7 kind-hearted dwarfs. Evil queen discovers that Snow White is still alive and tricks her into eating a poison apple, which puts her into a deep sleep. A prince finds her and wakes her up with a kiss, and they live happily ever after. However, the original story by the brothers Grimm has a much darker ending. In the original tale, when Snow White is poisoned by the apple, the prince doesn't wake her with a kiss. Instead, he stumbles and drops her, dislodging the poisoned apple from her throat, which brings her back to life. The story then takes a more gruesome turn as they plan a wedding for Snow White and invite all the kings and queens in the land, including the evil queen. She is punished by being forced to wear a pair of glowing red hot shoes. This ending was removed from the Disney film, obviously, as it was considered too disturbing for children. The fact that the original Snow White story is much darker than the Disney adaptation shows how much the tale has been sanitized over the years. Number 1, Hercules. Even though this isn't technically real life, it's a part of Greek mythology, so it's gotta count for something. Plus, the true story is much darker than the one portrayed by Disney in their animated movie. In the movie, Hercules is a half-human, half-god who falls in love with Megara, a sarcastic and lovable character who is enslaved by Hades. Hercules eventually frees her and they live happily ever after. However, in the original myth, Megara is the daughter of King Creon and Princess of Thebes, and the two don't actually fall in love. Instead, Megara is given to Hercules as a gift after he saved Phobos single-handedly from the minions. Over time, Megara bears him several sons, but things take a dark turn when Hera sends Hercules into an unstoppable madness. Hera deeply hated Hercules because he was a reminder of all the affairs committed by her son, who is also her brother Zeus. Hercules had some pretty bad mommy issues about this, even though she was not even the mother. And riddled with guilt, he enslaves himself to his cousin Eurystheus and performs the 12 labors in an attempt to atone for his sins. It's interesting to see how much the Disney movie changed the original myth, but it just makes sense.
Number 10, references to the Illuminati. Remember when we were in middle school and all we could talk about was the Illuminati? No? Just me? Well, anyway, one of the darkest messages in Toy Story 3 is about them. For those who don't know, the Illuminati is a group that may or may not exist, depending on who you ask, that controls and watches the human race. They have been pulling the strings for all of human history. In the film, it is supposedly referenced when the film's main antagonist, Lotso Huggin Bear, changes Buzz Lightyear's settings from play to demo. This has been seen by many as an act of brainwashing in order to spy on the other dolls. At the climax of the film, the character Ken doll warns the group about Lotso, saying, "He's made us into a pyramid and put himself on the top." And if you didn't know, a pyramid with an eyeball at the top is literally the symbol for the Illuminati. Now you know. What do you think? Is this a stretch, or did the Illuminati intentionally throw this in the film? I bet they did. I know you're watching. Number 9, neglected childhood. When I was a kid, there were very few characters in animation that frightened me more than Sid. You know, the big bad bully of the first film that tortures toys? I mean, what kid wouldn't be scared of him? He's literally dressed up as the Punisher. Well, you know, if I'm being honest, I kind of wore a lot of Punisher shirts when I was a kid too. I mean, I still do. But I swear, I didn't torture toys. Now, as much as we are programmed to despise the kid, we actually might have to start feeling bad for him. It is clear in the film that Sid is troubled, but it isn't until you dive deeper that you realize how rough his life actually is. In one scene, it is shown that Sid's father is passed out surrounded by empty pop cans. I know what you're thinking. He's snoozing. Well, unfortunately, that isn't the case. Pixar had to use pop cans due to the fact that the film was for children, but the cans actually represent empty liquor bottles. Sid's father was a raging alcoholic, and it is speculated that the suffering that Sid inflicts upon the toys is the pain that he suffered in his childhood. Number 8, the rise of technology and the fall of the West. Now, this one is going to be excited for anyone who played the Red Dead Redemption games. I mean, I did. Now, I think it is clear to most that the surface symbolism between Woody and Buzz is Out with the old and in with the new, right? I mean, that is literally the premise of the film, but if you dig deeper, it becomes far more inspired by history than you might have imagined. For those who aren't scholars about the Wild West, here's a small breakdown. During the late 1800s to the early 1900s, there were massive technological and cultural advancements. For many, this was new and exciting. They couldn't wait to be a part of progress. But for others, it was the end of their way of life. So throughout the first Toy Story film, we are witnessing Woody, who resembles the old ways, try to fight to save what he knows. But no matter how hard he tries, he cannot fight change. At number 7, we got Sid's aptitude for destruction. Sid's bedroom is a symbol of destruction and chaos that he creates throughout the film. This includes his toys being dismembered, which can be read as an allegory for childhood trauma, as mentioned earlier. In addition to the physical destruction, Sid's mental capacity for understanding why his behavior is seen as wrong is also lacking. He does not understand the consequences of his actions and often blames others for what he has done or for why he is doing things. This can be seen when he tries to blame Buzz Lightyear for being taken away from Andy's room, or when he brushes off Woody's attempts to explain why his behavior is not acceptable. The film does a brilliant job with this for many reasons, but the most important is we never know whether or not Sid is a product of nature or nurture. It is clear that he does have trauma, but he also exhibits behavior that is commonly seen amongst those who are naturally violent as well. Number 6, the gap between Pixar and Disney. Besides talking about cowboys and whatnot, there is actually a second allegory connected to Buzz and Woody's relationship, and that is the evolution of animation. I know what you're thinking, so what? Animation got better. How is that dark? Well, I'm glad you asked. The evolution of animation was not as smooth as you might think and actually came at a great price for many. In this case, Woody represents Disney and Buzz represents Pixar. At the forefront of new animation, Pixar led the charge, while Disney was still in what you could call the dark ages. As time went on, the need for old gen animators became scarce. Many people lost their jobs. See? What did I tell you? Darker than you thought, right? Number 5, immortality. As the great Wolverine once said, life is a gift. Immortality is a curse. Well, this statement holds very true within the Toy Story franchise as well. At the end of every film, we end up feeling happy, as we are all supposed to at the end of a kid's movie, right? Well, perhaps, but let's think about it for a bit longer. Throughout the films, it has been made clear that the toys go through generations of owners. The only thing that stops that is if they're destroyed. But what if they're not? It is a scary thought to think about one of our favorite toys being lost forever and being forced to experience it all with no end. I mean, the film never specifically mentions this, but logically it makes sense. I get it though, you can't tell kids about eternal loneliness and all that jazz, but it's there, trust me. Number 4, Jessie's fear of abandonment. When Woody is trying to convince Jessie to come with them out of Sid's home, she recalls being abandoned by her previous owner, Emily. A moment that highlights her deep-seated fear of abandonment. Woody is able to empathize with her, and with a newfound understanding of her fears, he works hard to gain her trust. The two eventually escape from Sid's home and embark on their own adventure back to Andy's house. This sequence serves as an important reminder that friendship can come in many forms. It highlights the power of empathy and shows us that there's a deep connection that can be formed between people or toys, regardless of age or background. This moment also sets up an important theme for the Toy Story franchise as a whole, that true friendships are forged through shared experience, mutual understanding, and sincere support. As Andy says in Toy Story 3, "You have been my friend all these years. You helped me when I was lost and needed you the most." Number 3, Andy's mom abandoning Jessie. Somebody name a cooler cowgirl than Jessie. Come on, I'll wait. Yes, the cowgirl we have all come to know and love for her hyperactive and witty demeanor may have a sadder backstory than you think. Again, I know what you're thinking. Eric, we already know her backstory. You just talked about it in the last point. Okay. But do we really? We all know Jessie was given away by her owner, okay? I'll give you that. But who was she? Well, it actually seems pretty clear, or at least debatable, that Jessie's old owner was actually Andy's mom. In a flashback scene, we get to see what Jessie's old life used to be like. She was having the time of her life with her previous owner. In the scene, the girl is wearing a red cowboy hat with white trim, the same one that Andy ends up wearing as a young boy. I guess no matter what we do, we always end up at home. Number 2, Andy's father. Now this has to be one of the saddest theories out there, but here it is. Within the Toy Story franchise, there has been an absent figure in Andy's life. His father. Throughout 4 films, we never get a single mention of him. Or so we thought, at least. When you go to the depths of the internet, you will find a theory stating that Andy's father has actually passed. How do you come to this conclusion, you may ask? Well, to start, when Woody was accidentally almost sold at a garage sale, Andy's mom swipes him back and says, Woody is an old family toy, even though we're made to believe that Andy has been Woody's only owner. So how does this work? Well, look how Andy's name is written on Woody's foot compared to Buzz's foot. 2 different sets of handwriting. Maybe Andy is Andy Jr. At the number 1 spot, we've got the connection to the pianist. This is certainly the darkest hidden message throughout the entire franchise. If you watch Toy Story 3 with a very grim and historical eye, you will notice that the film follows the horrific atrocities that were committed during the Second World War against the Jewish people. The film actually follows a very similar plot line to Adrian Brody's film The Pianist, which follows a Jewish man trying to survive in German-occupied Poland during the Second World War. The imagery is disturbing and uncanny when you think about it in this lens. You know, rounding up the toys, hiding in the attic, etc. There is no doubt in my mind that this has to be one of, if not the darkest hidden messages a kid's film has ever included.